Okay, Comp and Story. This video here is just to give you a little bit more help in getting your images into Photoshop if you decide to use that method to apply color to your 50 thumbnails. Again, I just want to reiterate, Photoshop is an option to use. It's not a must, it's a may for this project. But as I previously mentioned in our class, it's super helpful once your drawing is down and your grayscale levels are set. Applying the color is really easy, and it's fairly risk-free to your images if that's a concern for you. And it's going to be done very quick and edited. It's one of the advantages of working digitally. So I'm just going to give you a couple minutes here just to kind of show how to kind of get the image into Photoshop if you're not familiar with that as well. I think I kind of have maybe assumed that a little bit more than I should have, and so I want to give you some more information to kind of help you do that. And you can go back and review this video as well as you sort of get into that space. So I've pulled just a few of your thumbnail pages here, your early thumbnails, to kind of show you some different examples of I'm seeing your work as it's coming in, some of your scanning, photographing. All of those methods are fine. Some are certainly superior to others, but a lot of it is based off of the restrictions you have at your homes and the equipment that you have available. So I'm going to try to touch on what I'm seeing coming in and different ways you can use each of those to still make your project work. This one here, I think this is Jonathan's. This looks like it's scanned. So as you can see, the lights are already light on the background, your whites, your grays are set here. So that's all good. And it's pretty much ready to go. A couple things that I would encourage doing is just, let me just kind of slow down here. So what I did was I double clicked this layer here in Photoshop to turn this into a layer that's not locked. And then if you hit Command T on a Mac, or it's Edit, Transform, Rotate, just rotating this image so that it's a little bit more level. And one of the ways you can do that is by dragging a ruler down. As you see, I went all the way to the top of this ruler here, and I clicked here, I clicked and dragged a ruler down, and this helps give me a level, right? And so if I've transformed by just kind of rotating this anchor here, and if I hit the return key, notice I've kind of evened this image out a little bit. And so that's helpful when you eventually want to go in. If you want to get rid of this ruler, you can just click it. You see how it makes this little icon here and pull it up to the top. When you want to start going in and individually selecting out these panels, I can use my marquee tool here, rectangular marquee, create my selection, and then I can copy this, Command C on a Mac, Control C on a PC, new, oops. I can place that image into a new document. Okay, so a simple matter really of just making these images level to each other so that you can go through and then select these. And once you've created your marquee tool, your selection, you can just move that. You can bump that around, and you don't have to keep redrawing it. If you hold down the Shift key, it locks. Oops, excuse me. It will lock the position of the horizontal and the vertical position. You see how it kind of wants to snap to a specific location. Now the one thing you have to do is you have to make sure that you click first and then hold the Shift key. If you don't, what it will do is it will think you want to add more to the selection, and you don't want to do that. So you just want to click with your left mouse key first, click and then hold Shift, and that will allow you to drag it to the position that you want it to go. Okay, so that is an example here of scanned document. A scanned document is going to give you the best outcome because you're not dealing with light and shadow, or shadow rather, you're just dealing with sort of a pure light that's going across your image with an even tone. So that's really helpful, but I know that you don't all have access to scanners, and so I don't want to presume that, so I'm going to give you some other examples of ways that you can correct your images and prepare them for working on them on the computer, again, if you choose to do so. I'm just hitting the F key right now to make it full screen or not. So this image here was taken with a photograph. This is, I believe, McKinsey's. I think McKinsey will probably do these in digital anyways, but if you were to take a photograph of these images, one thing to watch out for is the little shadow that's kind of taking place here on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. And there are ways to correct that. It just takes a little bit more work. So a couple things we'll do here to this image as an example. I'm going to go ahead and pull down that ruler again to set the level for me. Then I'm going to rotate these panels just a little bit here, like this. If you use the PDF that I sent, all these panels, once you align them, they will become automatically aligned. So you won't have to go back through. If you hand drew each of the panels, that's fine. But just note that unless you're completely perfectly aligned on all your panels, oops, that won't necessarily be an automatic. You'll have to kind of manually gauge that. And now what we're going to do is we can see that the background here is not a perfect white. The gray, if I were to sample the gray here, right? If you look here again, we talked about this is your gradient scale here. So all the way at the top is your whitest white, all the way at the bottom is your darkest dark. We're about maybe 10%, down the scale in terms of our values here. And so what we're going to do is we just want to adjust that a little bit. And so what we'll do is we'll go down here. Do you see this little sort of half moon shape? We're going to click that and we're going to hit levels. And what you'll see here is that this shows the value gamut spread across your entire image. So imagine this is your image visualized as sort of a graph here. If you notice there's no information here, that means that the darkest darks possible are not really being represented in this image. And what this shows us here is that the lightest lights are very, very small. Now this is actually a good value range through here. You want to have a full kind of spectrum. What you don't want to have is a situation where there's not a lot over here whatsoever, and you just have a spectrum from here to here. You really want to have a full key situation like this, and she does, and so that's great. But we want to set our white balance a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here. This little eyedropper here samples a spot in the image that you want to set to your white point. That would be your lightest light. Sometimes this works great, sometimes this doesn't work as well, so we'll sort of explore that. So I'm going to just click right here and set that to be my white point. Now that's pretty good. If I want to adjust that further, I can actually drag this over to darken that up. And so the nice thing is this is on a layer, so you can adjust that a little bit. You can play with that and see if that feels right, or if you want, maybe I want to push the lights a little bit lighter. So I'll kind of drag this over and kind of punch up those whites, and so the page gets almost completely white. And then I'm just going to kind of pull this middle value. So just kind of play with these sliders a little bit until you get the results that you're looking for. That's pretty good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and merge that layer, which you can do by layer. You can flatten the image, or you can hit Command E, which merges down this layer. Now once it does that, you lose the capacity to make that adjustment. And that's okay though. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit the same sort of half moon and go down to Hue Saturation, and I want to kill all of the rogue color that's in this. Now there's color in here because this photograph was taken most likely indoors, and so the lights in your rooms are going to have a color to those. Maybe a blue color, or a sort of a yellow color depending on the type of light, like an incandescent or a fluorescent. It just depends on the type of light that you have. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the saturation of color down to nothing. And what you do, if you can see up in the upper right hand corner, if you look at that, you'll see that all the saturation, all the color saturation in this image is now gone. I will merge that down again. Command E or Control E should take care of that on a PC. We'll collapse that down. So that's pretty good, but I still have these shadows over here, and I'm going to go ahead and try to eliminate those. Now, ideally, when you're taking the photograph, if you do have to take a photograph, you can try to avoid this by taking a photo maybe outside when it's sort of overcast. It's actually kind of overcast right now. So as long as it's sort of bright and overcast, that eliminates the really, really harsh shadows. Another option is to maybe pin that up on a wall and take a picture where you have lights to the left or the right of you. If you did some of this empirical drawing, photographing your work, if you can set those lights not behind you or above you, but sort of at angles to the left or the right, that helps quite a bit to create a clear image. You want the light to be as even as possible across the image, which is not as easy as it sounds just because of the way light works, but there are options to do that. Just try to avoid those big major shadows. But let's say, some creep in and you've got to deal with those. And so let's go ahead and deal with those now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another levels here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the paint bucket here. This is an older version of Photoshop, by the way. This is CS5. It's old school. You will have all these tools in Photoshop CC if that's the program you download. So I'm going to take the paint bucket. It's going to be set to where this layer is, your fill here is black, and I'm just going to fill, make sure that this selected, this is your mask. I'm going to fill this, right? See, it's 100% black now. And then I'm going to take my airbrush tool, just my brush, and have that ready to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to deselect, sorry, what is that button that does that? That's not it. Give me just a second here for my memory to catch up. Okay, we'll disable the layer mask for a second. That was a right-click, disable layer mask. There's a hotkey, but I don't remember what it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the levels a little bit to brighten those sort of edges on the corner, like that. Now, as I do that, I'm starting to sort of blow out some of the other levels, right? You see how the tones here that are set, as I do that, I'm eliminating the areas up here I don't like, but I'm sacrificing, areas here where maybe I wanted that gray to be a little bit darker, and so that may not be what you want to do. So what we'll do is we will make that adjustment up there, and then we will enable this layer mask, and then we're going to actually brush out the areas that we do want. Right, so if I take the airbrush and I have my white selected, I'm going to reverse it out. I'm going to just knock out the areas here, right, where I want that to be just, totally white. So I'm going to kind of do that here. I'm just kind of brushing this out. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go ahead and merge that. And then I'm actually going to have to do the same thing a little bit down here one more time as well, because it's still pretty dark. So we're just going to create another levels. What I'm going to do first, let's just, again, I'll fill that with, make sure my mask is selected, fill that. Oops, got to use the right color. Fill it, disable it. Okay, adjust my levels to try to eliminate. Let's just really go nuts with this. Let's just go, we're going to pull this all the way so we get rid of all that. Now you can see I've completely blown out the image. It looks, dreadful at this point. It's destroyed all the gray values that Mackenzie has set here, but we're not going to keep it that way. Okay, we're going to re-enable this mask, and we're just going to, again, take our airbrush, make sure that mask is selected, make sure that white is your top here, it's your foreground color, and we're just going to kind of paint, if you will, brush, and sort of fix the values. We're losing a little bit of value right there with that. We kind of go back in and just sort of, you can reverse and go back through, switching this back to black, and you can correct that. And so that, it's a little bit more work, certainly. Again, the more you can do to make the scan super clean, the less kind of work you'll have to do to sort of set that up. But that gets us pretty nice and clean, really. So I'm going to go ahead and merge that down, and then this would be ready to go if I was going to apply that color to this image too. Okay. Let's see here. This one, this is Sam's, I believe. This one's actually really, really pretty close to going here. This one really just needs a little bit of a level adjustment to it. Again, you can see here, we'll kind of set our lights, right? And then we'll just kind of pull this here. Now this is a good example where you see when I adjust the light how this shifts when I do that. Look how that shifts over to the right. And I don't want to lose all of the gray, or excuse me, the darks here, so I'm going to pull this back over to get those darks pumped up a little bit more. So this is actually pretty clean here now. So this looks pretty good. I'm going to knock this back just a little bit, merge that down. Again, if I go over here to Hue Saturation, I can get rid of all the color. There's just, if you can see, there's just a little bit of yellow up here. Again, from some of the light. That's out of the way now. And then if I want to, you know, I can go up and I could adjust these little areas up here. It's not incredibly necessary since you are going to be removing each panel. But some of that gradient shadow area may creep into some of your panels. And so if you want to avoid that, that's an easy solution. But this one is really, really quite close. Ready to go here. This one here is Sarah's. And this one, because it has a little bit of a background, it's a good example to talk about how to sort of reconcile this, these image adjustments as well. So this one you can kind of see, again, we've got the color of the light. We've also got the table here. So we would be using a lot of tools to kind of prepare this. So, you know, I would come down here. I would adjust this. Now, Sarah is using the PDF. But one of the things that's happening is because the paper is just a little bit folded up. You see how because it's curved up here on the left, it's actually creating a little bit of a warp, and you can kind of see that that's taking place. What happens is the paper is just kind of naturally bowing up through moisture and things in the air. That's what paper does. And so you can see how things are pretty flat through here. But then they start to just bow just a little bit up. You see how it's bowing up. And again, that's because the paper is three-dimensional in this case, and it's curving a little bit up. So here's some ways that we can kind of adjust for that. What we can do is, not do what I just did. We can take the transform tool by doing a little selection marquee. We can go to Edit, Transform, and we can distort this. We can kind of distort this back into shape just a little bit. It's going to be, let's actually try Skew. No, you know what? Let's do perspective. I need something where it gives me a few more. What is that tool? Warp. That's what it is. Sorry. Okay, so warp gives me. You can see I was looking for. I need more options. So this allows me to do little adjustments, little micro adjustments in sort of smaller sections. So I might adjust this down just a little bit, maybe warp this up just a little bit to sort of get rid of some of that distortion. It's not going to be perfect. So in this case, you know, just maybe tape down your image if you have to photograph it, and you won't have to necessarily do all this extra little sort of fiddly bits to it. There we go. That helps. Kind of resolves a little bit of that warp. It's a little bit happening down here at the bottom too, but it's not too bad. Again, then we just take our marquee tool. We can select and we can crop. So you can go down. You can go up to image here. You can crop. It will crop to the selection that you have. This image also, you can see it actually has two different types of light coming in. You've got a warm light on the top left and then a cooler light coming on the bottom left. This is where using hue and saturation to really, you know, kill all of that color is going to be super important. And now I can do another levels adjustment just like I did on the other images there. Okay. So let's see. We'll just pull up. Let's see. Let's pull up Jonathan's again. I'm not going to adjust it, but just barely. All right, we're just going to kind of eyeball at this point. So again, just a reminder when you're applying the color, just to review that quickly, a layer on top and then you can set it to overlay, or you can set it to color. Again, the difference is, color is going to preserve your gray levels. And so there's something about that that's very, very handy. But I find that overlay, it multiplies or it screens the color, but I think it's a little bit more luminous, which I like a little bit more. So it's up to you. You can just switch back and forth between these blending modes. So you can explore it. You can just try. You can say, oh, I like color for this. I like overlay for this. Let's just trip to overlay. And again, my brush tool, if you pick, the digital airbrush, looks kind of like that, like a little, almost like a sun, like a glowing sun. I can go through and I can just apply a little bit of color. Oh, it made him nice and red. And so what you're going to see is that that color is going to be the most potent in areas where there is value down. You'll notice that it's almost not changing the background at all because there's no value in these light areas for it to change. It's only able to change, and you see those adjustments to areas where there is darker value, right? So that's why you want to be judicious in how you use your lights and where you place those. So just kind of can be considered about that. For these thumbnails, you're only using, maybe 1 to 2 values at the most. So this isn't necessarily the best example for using that because Jonathan kept his value range really, really tight. And that's good. Okay, that's good for these thumbnails because we can see a clear distinction between light and dark shapes. As you move into your final finished images, though, your 50 small production images, having those clear values and having a larger range of those will allow you to see that difference a little bit more. I'm just going to go ahead and actually apply a little bit of value here just for sake of kind of what we're doing. So I'm going to just build in here. I'm going to multiply in. Let's hit multiply. Remember, this is how you can actually apply value to your images as well if you want. If you just have the line art here, maybe you just did line art and you didn't do any kind of fill whatsoever, you could use the computer to actually apply your values as well. And so again, that's another option for you. Let's just kind of finish. Let's just do that right now. Why don't we just do that? So I'm just going to go ahead and multiply some values here into this image. Okay, let's have, so the sun's kind of coming this direction, so let's set some kind of middling values here. Again, you'll notice I have the multiply layer going on, and that means that I can preserve my line art. It's not going to impact it. I'm using the selection tool, the eyedropper, to go back and sort of pick, resample value if I want. So maybe I want the light kind of streaking through here like this, to kind of create something like that. That tool, he's sort of backlit. Here, maybe we darken this structure up. Well, that's pretty dark. Maybe not quite that dark. Just a little bit more. Maybe there's some shadows cast from that as well. And then maybe there's just a little bit of, just darken those clouds up a little bit to kind of illuminate, create a little shape to sort of hold his body. Just create a little bit more focus on this here. We're not going to spend too long on this. You can have fun. You can put little, grass highlights or fun stuff in there, whatever you want to do. And then I'm just going to darken him up just a little bit more. That is not as dark as I want him to be. Okay. There we go. That's enough. So now we sort of apply just a little bit more light and shadow to this, and now we'll go ahead and apply that color. And if you want, if you do your value adjustments to this in Photoshop, then you can just create a second layer here. So you can have a multiply layer and then an overlay layer. And then I can, can take my airbrush tool here and apply just a little bit of color. And again, we show this with just a simple, let's just use kind of a singular color here. Right? You're going to see though that all the color is found in your grays, right? You're not seeing really much in the light areas. All the whites just don't hold the color. They can't. Right? So something like that right? That's just one color, and it just creates a little bit of mood to it. Not much. One color is all you really need to do to make that work. If you want to use a secondary color, don't use more than 2 though. You're definitely limited to that. But let's just pull in the complement. Let's do kind of a low saturation kind of blue, and we'll just sort of pull those in. Simple, just complementary color here, right? We'll let the kind of complementary colors live in the shadows. And there you go. If you don't like it, turn it off. You can try something completely different. Right, but that's how you can do it. So, all right. Any questions? Definitely reach out to me. Send me an email. You can show me anything you want as we push towards the end of this week here and you kind of close the distance before the end of the semester. But yeah, happy to help any way I can. All right, have a great day.